Every time you ask Cursor to write code, every time Notion's AI drafts a document, every time HeyGen renders a video, there's a decent chance the actual intelligence behind that moment doesn't come from the company whose logo you're staring at. It comes from a business you've probably never heard of. In the last 12 months, that business went from an afterthought to a $13 billion company that just closed a $1.5 billion funding round. Its annualized revenue reportedly tripled in about 90 days. Not tripled in a year. 90 days. By the end of this video you'll understand why almost every fast-growing AI startup quietly depends on companies like this one, why the money in AI is shifting from training models to running them, and why that shift could either mint the next generation of AI infrastructure giants, or quietly get squeezed out of existence. This is the story of Baseten, and the hidden business of AI inference. To understand why a company like Baseten matters, you need to understand the difference between training and inference. Training is the expensive, headline-grabbing part. It's OpenAI or Anthropic spending hundreds of millions of dollars on massive GPU clusters over months, teaching a model to reason, write code, or generate images. That's the part that makes the news and the funding announcements. Inference is everything that happens after training ends. It's what fires every single time a real user actually sends a prompt to that model. It sounds less dramatic, but it happens billions of times a day, and running it efficiently at scale is its own brutally hard engineering problem. You have to route requests across clusters in real time, manage GPU availability across multiple cloud providers because no single cloud has enough chips, auto-scale instantly when traffic spikes, and keep latency low enough that a chatbot doesn't feel like it's loading over dial-up. Most AI startups don't want to solve that problem themselves. They want to ship product features, not build data center orchestration software. So they rent that capability from someone else. Baseten is one of the companies renting it to them, sitting quietly underneath products like Notion AI, Cursor, Quora, Retool, and HeyGen, handling the actual model calls those products depend on every second of every day, completely invisible to their end users. Here's where it gets genuinely wild. In December of 2025, Baseten's annualized revenue was reported at around $200 million. By March of 2026, just 3 months later, that figure had reportedly climbed to roughly $600 million, an increase of close to 1900% year-over-year. The company says its platform now processes more than 1 billion inference calls every single day, spread across 87 clusters and 18 different cloud providers worldwide. Now look at the funding trajectory that matched that growth, because it tells the same story from a different angle. Baseten raised a $150 million Series D, 9 months later, a $300 million Series E valued the company at $5 billion. Then, just 5 months after that, in June of 2026, Baseten closed a $1.5 billion Series F, structured across 2 tranches, pushing its valuation up to $13 billion. 5 months, from $5 billion to $13 billion. Investors leading that round reportedly included Altimeter Capital, Conviction, and Spark Capital, with Sands Capital and Wellington Management co-leading. That is not typical enterprise software growth. That's what happens when a company plants itself at exactly the choke point of an industry that's expanding faster than almost anything in modern economic history. To put that valuation jump in perspective, going from $5 billion to $13 billion in 5 months is a pace usually reserved for companies riding a once-in-a-decade wave, not steady annual fundraising cycles. So why are companies like Cursor and Notion, well-funded teams full of serious engineers, choosing to outsource this instead of building it themselves? 2 reasons stand out. First, cost and speed. Buying and provisioning enough GPUs to run inference reliably at scale, across regions, with proper failover, is a multi-year infrastructure project even for a well-capitalized company. Renting that capability from a specialist can be live in weeks instead of years. Second, and arguably more important, nobody actually knows which AI model is going to win long-term. A product built around one flagship model today might switch to a completely different one 6 months from now, depending on cost, speed, or quality. Companies like Baseten let their customers swap the underlying model without rebuilding the infrastructure underneath the product. That flexibility is really the product being sold here. Not raw compute, but the ability to stay model-agnostic while the entire AI landscape keeps reshuffling itself underneath everyone's feet, sometimes month to month. Baseten isn't alone in chasing this. Together AI, Fireworks AI, Grok, and a handful of others are fighting for the same territory, all betting that as AI usage scales from millions to billions of daily requests, the inference layer becomes its own massive, permanent business, separate entirely from whoever wins the underlying model race. It's essentially the same thesis that made Amazon Web Services one of the most valuable businesses on the planet, applied to artificial intelligence. You don't need to win the model wars to make billions, if you own the layer that everyone else has to run through to actually use those models. And the scale backing that thesis is enormous. Anthropic alone crossed roughly $47 billion in run-rate revenue by May of 2026. OpenAI is sitting north of $20 billion in annualized revenue with about 900 million weekly active users. Every single one of those interactions has to be computed somewhere, served by somebody, routed through some piece of infrastructure, and that serving layer is quickly becoming one of the most contested pieces of real estate in all of technology. But here's the question nobody has fully answered yet. Is this a durable, defensible business, or a very well-funded middleman? Model providers themselves, OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, are getting better and cheaper at serving their own inference directly, in-house. If that trend continues, the value a company like Baseten provides could get squeezed from both sides at once. Commoditized on price from below, and undercut by the model labs controlling distribution end-to-end from above. That is genuinely the bet every investor in that $13 billion round is making, that inference stays complicated and multimodal for long enough that a specialist layer keeps mattering, rather than eventually getting absorbed by the giant sitting right above it in the stack. Right now, the growth numbers say that bet is paying off spectacularly. Whether it keeps paying off over the next 18 months is genuinely one of the more interesting open questions in AI right now, and one worth tracking closely if you care about where the actual durable value in this industry ends up sitting. It also mirrors a pattern seen repeatedly in past tech cycles, where the infrastructure layer underneath a boom ends up outlasting many of the flashier products built on top of it. So the next time a product you already use ships a new AI feature overnight, remember there's a good chance an entire hidden layer of infrastructure companies made that possible, and almost none of them have a name most consumers would recognize. Baseten reportedly went from $200 million to $600 million in annualized revenue in a single quarter, tripled its valuation in about 5 months, and now runs over 1 billion AI requests a day for some of the most talked about startups on the internet, and most people watching this video had never heard of the company until just now. That's usually where the real money in a gold rush ends up. Not with the miners out front, but with whoever quietly sells the shovels behind the scenes. If you want more breakdowns like this, real companies, real numbers, no hype, subscribe, because this is exactly the kind of story we dig into here every single day.